People never forget how you made them feel, so the saying goes. It was at the square that night that I finally realized why. It was us, 10th anniversary, and the ballroom was illuminated by mirrored walls that reflected the light and golden chandeliers. I had spent 10 years curating perfection. Gold leaf was used to emboss the name cards. Don gave out the champagne. Pragnan. Claire de Lune was portrayed by the string quartet. I used the same scent that it did on the day of our wedding, as well as Daniel. Daniel maintained the same arrogant grin that he always did when he was the center of attention. 80 people from the city's elite circles swiveled in their seats as Mimey ideal husband lifted his glass and gave it a gentle tap, saying, "To love, tote the adjacent table." Someone whispered expectantly, "Family, to 10 amazing years." Daniel cleared his throat. "I appreciate you coming tonight," he said, his voice practiced. "I believe that 10 years of marriage is a lifetime of memories." His voice trailed off, and many leaned in, thinking that the drama was feeling. "Jessica, you've disgusted me since our wedding," he said with a sly smile. "Night." There was a gasp when a wine glass fell out of someone's grasp. Daniel stood upright, while someone nervously laughed as the mother covered her lips, enjoying the terror. "I've put up with this icy, inept fod for 10 years, played the part of a devoted spouse, but I'm done acting like that tonight." I got up, straightened the folds of my champagne-colored dress, and turned before he could finish thinking. The lights dimmed, and I gently nodded to the AV guy by the stage, as we had done. The strings paused in the middle of the line as the projector screen behind the band came to light. "What the devil is this, Daniel?" Their last note lingering in the air like smoke. His glass shook a little in his palm as he spoke, and I didn't respond since I didn't need. The screen flickered before going black, and it was displayed in gold serif characters. Read, 10 years of happiness. No one missed the irony. A gentle tune started with our first dance song. I was wearing my bridal gown in the first frame, spinning in slow motion, grinning at a man I believed to be my love interest, and Daniel. The room was still as he stared back, his face unreadable, and I could sense the whispers behind me. Is this their wedding video? Is this a segment of the tension that is folding in on itself? Program? My jaw remained steadfast, and I gazed at the screen as if it Daniel's face. Didn't my life unfold before 100 frozen stares? Went pale. "What is this, Jessica?" he said louder this time, and I didn't. Instead, I let the next chapter of our meticulously planned deception unfold while I gazed at him, play out for everyone to witness. However, neither he nor anyone else realized that this was more than a montage. It was an indictment, and we were just getting started. I had a migraine 3 days prior to the anniversary, so I came home early. As usual, the morning began with coffee in the Langford kitchen. Claude Daniel was in the middle of a business conversation with his assistant when I told him I wasn't feeling well before we left for school. "Go rest," he muttered as he browsed through his phone. "Well," he said, hardly looking up. When I got back about noon, the penthouse was remarkably silent, as if it were whole. Dingy immediately went to the bedroom, kicked off my heels, and was able to breathe. I saw Daniel's phone on the nightstand, unlocked, by itself, shortly before he was ready to slip into bed. Really different from him. Daniel carried his phone around like he gazed at it for a few long seconds before realizing that it was welded to his body, picked it up. The screen brightened instantaneously, and a preview of a new message flickered. "You mentioned that red was your favorite color, and I'm eager to try on the new set." When I saw the sender's name, Kitten, I closed my throat, hesitated, and then used my hands. I unlocked it. Chloe's birthday. Daniel had prepared 1,000 boardroom speeches and charity galas, never bothered to modify his passcode. A minefield emerged in the text thread of treachery. Voice notes, messages, and pictures from Ashley Monroe, the executive assistant, who is 28 years old, said, "I hate pretending you're just my boss." Wrote, "I hate seeing you go home to her." Daniel responded, "Just 3 more days," a known message. "Let her celebrate her anniversary. I'll stop playing house as soon as it's over." Another message, "Didn't worry about the prenuptial agreement. My lawyer advises me to wait until if Terry can leave the anniversary with half of my name, my house, and my child, future." With the phone clenched in my palm like it was searing through my flesh, I slid onto the edge of the bed. Pictures of Daniel and Ashley in his office after hours at the Four Seasons. One of them was wearing what I knew to be my robe. I didn't cry at the time. I just felt as though a door in a house I didn't own was slamming shut inside of me. I discovered I was haunted. I had coffee with someone the following morning, but it wasn't a friend. Miles Grayson, a former federal investigator who is not a lawyer, Turnedway had previously met years ago when he assisted my father as a private investigator, reveal a corporate embezzlement ring. I discreetly informed him of everything, methodically, as if I were recounting the life of another person. He listened without interruption, merely occasionally nodding. So, what precisely do you want? He inquired when he finally had a pen poised over his notebook. I exclaimed, I want proof, looking him in the eye. Timelines are what I want. I'd like pictures, places, discussions, everything. Leaning back, he drummed his pen against the table. You'll pay for it, he said. Money is not an issue, I said. This isn't merely regarding divorce. Exposure is the issue here. I want everyone to see him for who he truly is. Miles' eyebrow went up. And Jessica, what's your ultimate objective? My coffee was swirled once, twice, and for the first time in days, I grinned. A party he won't soon forget. It just took 3 days for Miles. It took me 3 days to dispel the delusion I had spent 10 years creating, having faith. He delivered a stylish leather binder with the files. No electronic, no emails, no copies. He was aware of his actions. In my study, I opened it, and the soft background jazzes suddenly to upbeat and to phony. The initial page was a picture. Daniel, 10 years younger, outside a software business that is failing in Brooklyn. A foreclosure notice was pinned to the door next to him. It was 3 months prior to our nuptials. A timeline appeared on the following page. His companionship during that year's spring. He began dating me 2 weeks later. I turned to the following part. Telephone etiquettes, bank statements, and screenshots from social media. Daniel had not simply fallen in love with me. I had been his aim. Langford, the name of my family, opened doors and most individuals were unaware that Manhattan even existed. We went to more than simply the Met Gala. A portion of it was funded by us. Daniel as well understood that. He wasn't looking for love with me, for legacy. He sought me out. He presented pretting it was a coincidence. He positioned himself at a gallery opening sponsored by my father. He looked at my hobbies, immersed himself into every area I occupied and imitated my values. Every action was computed. The Langford board was already evaluating him for a junior role when he made the proposal. I had been the big prize, and he had been playing the long game. The file contains 1 page, displayed a letter that Daniel had written to his roommate from college. Jessica's marriage is more than just a victory. It's safety. I'll be able to lead the business after her father retires. It's too subtle for her to notice. I remained focused on that sentence until the letters became hazy. It's too subtle for her to notice. He had made many mistakes, but his worst error was that. Slowly, I closed the binder, my freezing hands. It went beyond simple treachery. It was an invasion. He had looked me over like a blueprint. Created a part, performed it perfectly, but now I owned the script. To compose. That evening, I gave Miles another call. I said, I need a favor. I'd like you to assist me in filming something. He paused. What sort of thing? I viewed the city below me, pulsing like a sleeping beast, through the window. I said, a wedding video. This time only, it won't be false. I informed Daniel I had an idea the following week. Let's create a video. A tea dinner. As I ran my fingertips down his sleeve, I added sweetly, for Chloe, for when she's older, she can see our 10th anniversary. He held up an eyebrow. Something like a documentary, I said. Us conversing at how we got here, about love, and about family. He smiled smugly, like usual, at last accepting the public persona. Just that, I muttered. That's right. He never observed that the camera angles were excessively expert. He never inquired about the sound technician's courtroom experience, surveillance, and he most certainly didn't realize Chloe had moved out. She was already at my mother's house, property in Connecticut. I was going to let loose far from the storm. I practiced my smile in front of the mirror in my dressing room at the plaza on the morning of the anniversary. Nodi used the soft one during luncheons for charities. I didn't save the proud one for Clochul Productions. This was not like the others. This woman's smile showed that she had at last ceased expressing regret for being too blind, too patient, and too trusting. The smile of a woman who was well versed in her field. I touched up my lipstick and smoothed my gown. The hairdresser fussed over the hem while hovering close by. She remarked, You look radiant. I gave a nod, not truly listening to her. The ballroom was being set up somewhere below us. Name cards with a gold accent. The Langford crest is fashioned into an ice sculpture with lavender and white peonies. Everything Daniel had ever desired. He still thought he owned everything. As I entered the hallway, Daniel was already there with Ashley, enjoying a glass of champagne. He brought her, of course. I had demanded. She is on your squad, and I had uttered without malice. It's just. Ashley was dressed in a crimson satin gown that was too tight for the occasion. Like a trophy, she clutched to his arm. They appeared practiced, as though they had rehearsed their treachery. I didn't recoil. I gave them a hostess greeting. Ought to. You succeeded, I remarked kindly. Ashley blinked. Daniel squinted his eyes. You've changed, he remarked softly. Lighter, I said. It has to be the illumination. Our path led to the top table. My parents were seated close by. My mom is looking at me questioningly. She was aware of the change. She knew enough to stay, even though she didn't know everything. Silent. Naturally, Chloe wasn't present. I'd informed everyone that she was spending the night with her grandparents. I wanted to keep her from seeing what was about to happen. Not quite yet. As the pianist started to perform, Daniel got up to make his usual toast, supplied, but with a little extra shine for the event. However, he was unable to complete it this time due to the reduced lights. The video started as the projector came to life. Not the charming montage that Hennet surprisingly, but the first break in his porcelain mask. The visitors swiveled in their seats. Daniel stopped in the middle of a sentence. He looked 10 years younger on film, seated in a cheap suit, laughing in front of the camera. When he said, "Of course I married her," clinking and laughing, "You think I'd pass up a Langford?" Glasses. Daniel, younger, went on. In Manhattan, her father is regarded as a deity. She's a gentle, innocent woman who always says yes before asking what she's signing. There was silence in the room. Samiona gasped. Another person dropped a fork. Daniel's expression contorted. Turn. Jessica, take it off, he snarled. However, I remained sat, my gaze fixed on the television. This is your moment, my love, I whispered. Have fun. The video paused. Another one started. This time, the CCTV footage from the hotel. Ashley and Daniel. They were laughing in the corridor. A kiss that was stolen within the elevator. The timestamp. Hours after he informed me last Tuesday that he was in Washington, D.C., for meetings. Not only were his lies revealed, they were made everlasting. Heger bed the remote control. I had it because I was in control, so it wasn't there. Things at this time. The video ended abruptly. The ballroom was momentarily paralyzed. Inshame has nowhere to hide in that weird, resonant silence. Then the screen sprang to life, up once more, but in a gentler voice. Dim twilight light, a bedroom, and Chloe with a teddy fox in her lap. She sat cross-legged on her bed. Mom. Wench asked the camera if her father would be returning home. My voice softly off-screen replied, Sweetheart, he has a late shift tonight. Chloe scowled. He is always working over my working hours. Does he dislike his being here? No modifications or script were present. Simply the truth caught at a moment I had previously attempted to ignore. Ripples of gasps through the space. With one hand to her heart, I watched my mother turn away. Daniel seemed horrified, caught up in his own disintegration, followed by Chloe's voice. Did I do something wrong? She said, her voice gentle at first, then trembling as she sobbed. The video in that frame halted. Her face was smeared with tears. The only sound in the room was Samione in the back is sniffling. It could have been me or Ashley. Couldn't tell anymore. Daniel heaved his chest and pushed his chair back. This is repulsive, he growled. Our daughter is being used by you. I stood up and said, Don't. Calm but piercing voice. Never mention her name as if she were merely a prop in your narrative. Only because of her due to waited this long. I held up my hand as he attempted to speak, and the last clip started to play. Once more, it was Daniel whispering in a high-end office, into a telephone. He remarked, No, she won't see it coming. I'll freeze the accounts as soon as the paperwork is filed. She's too preoccupied with becoming a mother to notice. I was no longer required to narrate. For me, the video was narrating the story. I moved gently toward the middle of the ballroom and stopped right next to him. Yui replied, You married me for legacy. However, you never realized that a moniker isn't what defines my legacy. It arises from understanding when to back off and when to engage in combat. I grabbed my clutch.it, produced a single, thick, elegant envelope. I gave it to him without squirming. The documents are divorce paperwork. Everything has already been acquired by my lawyers under my name. You have lost access. My apartment, the frozen accounts, the company has watched the video. Daniel lowered his gaze to the envelope as I feet could come back to haunt him. His voice was barely heard as he replied, "You can't do this." You needy leaned in so that only he could hear me. You were correct about I was too soft, I muttered. But tenderness isn't weakness. It's self-control. I've also stopped holding back tonight, he said, sinking into his chair, eyes darting around. The room, deflated. Nobody, not even Ashley, glanced at him. Ashley, in particular, was silently withdrawing toward the exit with a blanched face. As the tablecloths. I went back to my chair and raised my glass. In all honesty, I said merely and drank. I believe the worst was over. Daniel's exposure in board members who had pleaded with him to speak at their summits, our friends and our families would be. I was mistaken though, for the room was the climax of the symphony of wrath. Hadn't finished processing what had happened when a man I hadn't seen in years, Henry Ashcroft, stood up, Daniel's former boss, the chairman of Langford Industries, and a longtime friend of my father mentor. He had flown in from Geneva that morning, and his appearance alone attracted attention. I was frozen by what he held in his palm, even though it was silent and unexpected. He cleared his throat and produced a little leather folio with a gold seal. And Langford Blue was not going to talk today, he said in a calm but piercing voice. But given that we've all just watched as the truth comes to light, maybe it's time to complete what Jessica began. Danielle Stephane. Henry gave him a direct look. You lied to us, to the business, not just to your wife Daniel. You vowed to uphold the integrity of your connection with Ashley Monroe and signed conflict of interest disclosures, professional. He unfolded the folio, and we discovered a trail of papers, her advancement, and her bonus plan, the last-minute limited share transfer. Danielle, Henry yelled, "You can't accuse me of sitting." His voice reverberated through Thea like a gavel. You're being taken out of the room, not merely accused. Henry turned to face me as there was an anxious, shocked murmur of voices. Jessica, it's time we let you prove that you are the only Langford. With both heart and spine, as your father always claimed. He put the our executive control paperwork on the folio in front of me. Your name is on them now. This time, my hands didn't shake. I opened the folder and signed a single, flowing signature, feeling as though I was regaining a piece of myself. Daniel was still motionless next to a seat, and I glanced at him, not realizing I'd lost. Only we're done here. However, the evening wasn't over with him, because an unidentified police entered the scene as the guests were starting to get up and escape the wreckage, through the side door. 2 more people arrived after that, separated like water. One officer, Daniel Langford, stated, "We need you to accompany for what? A poor marriage." Daniel laughed sharply and bitterly. The officer didn't flinch. Insider trading, fraud, and misappropriation of business funds. A moment later, Ashley gasped as they arrested him in front of everyone he had once charmed, controlled, and deceived. What? No, this isn't. But nobody was paying attention, not to him, not to her. Slowly, the ballroom began to empty, with some people going out while others whispered, "Quiet." The ice sculpture started to move, but the string quartet never came back. Melt. While the festivities were over, something new had started. I stood silently in the middle of it all, experiencing the strain of each step that had led me here, before turning and walked away. The silence I anticipated did not materialize in the days that followed. Weeksy imagined the following morning would be quiet, like a calm after the storm. But it just changed. My phone was buzzing constantly, but it was louder than the gala had ever been. Board members, reporters, missed calls, news alerts, and even distant relatives whose weddings I had never been invited to. The headlines all shouted the same word in different fonts. Langford insider scandal at Langford Industries reveals a husband in a public meltdown, betrayal in the ballroom. By midday, I was suffering from a migraine that was unabated by medication. Stood at my parents' Connecticut townhouse's kitchen counter, stirring tea. I refused to drink while playing upstairs with my mother. Chloe was unaware of the entire situation, only that her mother and father will be living in separate homes and that she would be spending some time with her. grandmother. When she inquired as to why, I would just stated because I want you to be in a calm place. She agreed and inquired as to whether hernet the headlines, but the part that broke me was that stuffed fox might come to it was her purity preserved, not the pictures, not even the video that was playing on the morning TV. When I switched on the television at 3, I saw Daniel's arrest. Repeatedly, intercut with film of me raising a glass to the truth, and that shaky hotel security footage of him with Ashley, had issued a statement, offering a weak defense regarding manipulated videos and personal grudges, but it made no difference. The harm was too severe, the video was too authentic, and the court of public opinion had already rendered its decision. I wasn't sure if I was satisfied or not, colder like a release. I opened the front door when I heard a knock. It to discover Miles Grayson carrying a simple manila in his typical dark suit envelope. He remarked, "Told you I deliver." I grinned, moved aside, and opened the door for him. "Final report," he said, setting the packet on the coffee table. "Financial Bradians, trip records, and a few questionably legal offshore accounts will that help the SSC." He sat with his arms folded across from him. "You may have your day in court, or 10. I glanced out. The window where the case file had already been begun, the crimson and gold leaves of the trees had started to fall. Autumn had always been. You ever become weary of watching others fall apart? "This is my father's favorite season." Miles laughed softly when I responded, "Not really, but I do like seeing someone." He stood prepared to go, but he added, "One more thing. Hold the thread for once. Discovered something strange. Read the reports." Last section, page 42. Then he disappeared, leaving me with only that mysterious note and no explanation. I waited till while Chloe was sleeping. I waited for the house to be quiet before opening the envelope. I flipped over the names, numbers, and pictures until I came upon it on page 42. I then noticed a scanned copy of a letter Daniel had written 2 years before to our wedding, addressed to Somio named Lillian Carter. Premarital agreement as the subject line. Strategy. I stared at the letter for a long time after the words ceased, and my blood froze. Lillian Carter. The name wasn't that strange. In fact, it was painfully familiar. She had once, if distantly, been a part of my universe, present. She was a shrewd, composed woman who worked in my father's legal division. She had a subtle power about her that made her seem to know everything before anybody else. But she never lingered long at corporate gatherings. She handled our prenuptial agreement when Daniel and I were newly engaged. The kind of person who could conceal blades beneath smiles, hardly paid attention at the time, too preoccupied with picking out flowers, setting the table, and dreaming about the ideal life. But the letter, it was private and personal, not professional, and it began with Daniel outlined a plan in it. "Dearest Lily," and concluded with "Yours always D." He described how marrying into the Langford name was cold, clinical, and deliberate, would obtain access to internal investments and figure out how to keep Victorious happy long enough to make money. Also mentioned our future child. "One heir will seal the deal." I dropped the page, my palms trembling. Fond. Then, "We'll see." I had been used by an entire arrangement, not just a spouse who had misled me. Lillian had assisted him. In boardrooms, she had sat across from me, shook my hand with her manicured nails, and for a while, I was unable to breathe as they plotted to use me as a pawn, looking me in the eye. My entire marriage, Mithy, had created the basis around which all motherhood had been built. The following morning, I saw Miles once more, this time away from cameras and rumors. I slipped the note inside an Upper East Side cafe. He didn't even blink. "What do you know about her?" "Lillian, across the double 6 months after your wedding. Carter, the previous corporate counsel, departed Langford, currently serving on the board of a hedge fund that is managed by, you guessed it, Ashman Rowe." "Ashley was the bait," he said, clenching his teeth. "Booyah." It turns out Daniel was never working alone. The architect was Lillian. I felt sick. Did my father know? Miles shook his head after giving me a long look. "Your father was many things, but oblivious to treachery." I suppose he suspected, which is why he never handed Daniel complete authority, which is why I leaned back in my chair and locked down the voting shares before he went. Under the weight of that revelation, the cafe's noise faded, had attempted to shield me, but he was only able to get me ready for the storm. I took out my phone and accessed the contact list for the Langford board. Lily Yancey paused after hovering my fingertip over her phone, but her name was still there. No, not but first. I needed something more. I looked to Miles. Can you discover out where she is tonight? He gave a cautious nod. Do you want to fight? No, I replied. I want a public audience somewhere where she won't be able to this time. My voice didn't falter. She assisted in creating the deception. It's just fair enough. She listens to what I have to say. The ideal result took less than 48 hours. Chance to locate me. The Women's Executive Alliance was holding its black tie event, the Autumn Gala. We're under the historic conservatory's chandeliered ceilings. The most influential women in the city congregated. I hate in the past. I consistently turned down the invitation, happy to let others take center stage while I provided support from the darkness. However, this year was different. I had a purpose and ensured that Lillian Carter's name was billed. As a keynote speaker in addition to being a guest, Miles helped me get a speaking engagement on corporate legal ethics. The irony almost made me chuckle. Slot. It wasn't difficult. The Langford scandal's media craze had forced me to in one piece. They referred to me as the Phoenix wife, and in another, the A's who battled back. I didn't worry about the headlines. I was concerned that Lillian would be present and wouldn't anticipate it. The night of that came late, but I was dressed elegantly and subtly in blue silk for the gala, purposefully, as the main course was being cleared. Discussions became silent. Faces turned as I entered. Some gave empathetic nods while others gave a curiosity, but I was focusing on the corner table by the stage instead of them. Lillian sat by herself, scanning her face unreadable via her phone. She hadn't aged, still immaculate, still cold. The event chair gave me a warm greeting and gestured for me to move boldly and gently to take my spot on stage, each heel clicking against a marble floor, a silent proclamation. Lillian looked up at last, and our gazes locked, only a moment, just long enough. She straightened her back and blinked, but I had already won. I stood at the stage and said, "Good evening," in a firm voice. I wasn't sure I belonged here when I was first asked to speak tonight. After all, I allowed others to mold my story, my profession, my marriage, and my silence for years. But recent experiences have taught me that being a woman in a position of authority entails more than just having a title. It also entails standing your ground, particularly when the earth underneath you was made to crumble. Lillian's fork hesitated. The room held its breath in midair. My husband made a lifelong pledge to me. Before we had exchanged vows, he was plotting my downfall. He wasn't acting alone. Had assistants, legal assistants, trusted assistants, and my voice became more piercing. But you see, the thing when trust is broken, it's louder, and in my case, it broke so the whole city could hear it clearly. There was a mutter of comprehension, a change in weight. Lillian's face had turned pale, and she made a hand thought he shivered a little and stared at her. To those who sit next to us and make plans we now see you, our downfall. To those who erase our dignity while writing our names and contracts. And seeing is the first step toward justice. I thanked them gently as I concluded my address. I didn't linger because the ovation that followed was precise, controlled, and sharp like a verdict rather than deafening. I didn't have to after the speech because Lillian's expression was so silent. The gala continued around her, but she never came up to me or spoke to me. I walked out of the conservatory without turning around, just sitting there, fragile behind a glass of unopened wine, stepped out into the cool night air and at last, let out a breath. James called me the following morning. "There's something I need to show you," remarked my father's old lawyer in an abnormally tight voice. "Where did your father leave behind?" My stomach nodded. I hadn't gone in the vault, the one beneath his former Langford office, since the funeral. Not since Daniel quietly lobbied for control as the board rushed in and he feigned to be grieving. I had the keys now, and I was entering that office as the CEO, not simply as a daughter. The vault was dust-covered shelves, steel walls, and colder than I remembered. James Letty was escorted to a safety deposit drawer with a single initial on it. V. Incidicond and a little leather box with a sealed envelope 6 months prior to me wedding. My father's handwriting was clearly mine. "Jessica, if you're reading this, then I've been right about what I suspected." I was unaware of the extent of the manipulation, but I saw enough that I decided to take action. Daniel wasn't who he claimed to be. Safeguards, sufficient to have you ready. 2 items are attached. 1. The complete breakdown of the prenuptial agreement I revised, which negates his claims even though you never signed it. To your fortune, as well as the identity of the individual who assisted me in discovering his plans. I hesitated. my heart racing. The envelope contained a document that was folded with surgical accuracy. The unbreakable, transparent prenuptial agreement, glued to a business card on the back. Private Investigations, Miles Grayson. Yelonian. That vault. Laughing aloud, I said in a whisper, "You old fox, you were aware." If fact that Miles had discovered me wasn't a coincidence. He was dispatched by my father, had left a protective trail that was covered up by distance years ago. It blinked back tears. I had assumed that I was the only one stepping into the flames, but my father had already placed the stone escape path. I thought of Chloe, the woman I was with, as I drove home, was evolving into the legacy I wished for her to carry on. Not cash, not things, but the unwavering conviction that battling for dignity was worthwhile, and that being silent did not equate to being strong. The circle needed to be closed. I took a seat to my desk and started writing that night. Nor a press release, nor a legal documentation. A letter, one that would eventually be read by my daughter, and one that would start saying, "Chloe, here's what your father did, and here's how we rose from it." The ensuing weeks were far from tranquil. The media maelstrom changed rather than subsided. Daniel's expression waspishly disappeared, leaving behind a trail of courtroom doodles and news tickers that said, "Former CFO indicted," away from the general public. There were rumors of her resignation, a plea agreement, and fear. Lillian discreetly resigned from each board she was seated on, saying for private reasons. She never got back to me. I didn't have to. A few conclusions and exposure is necessary, not conflict. However, real closure isn't the lack of sound. When the noise subsides, that's what you hear. I eventually located a new location for us. A calm apartment with lots of windows and no ghosts in the heart of the city. For me, it was Chloe's laughter reverberated throughout our new flat. It was the pause in between bored emails, trust instead of anxiety. I was looking out the windows of my father's Langford executive office for the first time. Didn't feel like an imposter, yet once did. During a soggy afternoon, Miles dropped by with a white envelope in hand. Without warning, he remarked, "Last piece of the puzzle, it comes from an inner source and Thede wanted you to have it, so they sent it to you." A copy of Danielle Spilla's statement, not to be made public. Only one line caught our attention. I believed I could beat her. I didn't think she would defend herself. I folded it, slipped it into my journal's back. It was just that now. A footnote with an account of a man who misjudged the woman. Depositions, legal hearings, and years of cleanup would all be part of the process. However, I was already finished on an emotional and spiritual level. On a Saturday morning, I spent assisting Chloe in painting a mural on her bedroom wall. Forests, foxes, and stars. Would it be possible for her to invite Grandma to see it? Of course, I replied. Mimother had become calmer, less judgmental, and more in the moment lately. Perhaps, she noticed that Serap's removing the illusion of Daniel had finally opened her eyes to what she hadn't noticed before. In any case, the past was no longer as significant as it once was. After a few days, I came back to the conservatory for a modest charity dinner, not for retaliation or show. One of the coordinators, "They're still talking about that speech you gave, the one where you didn't name it," he said, leaning forward and whispering, "Names, but it was felt by everybody." I gave a kind grin. "That wasn't a speech," I said. "That was a beginning. It also marked the start of an undefined life, through reclamation rather than treachery. Of a woman who is not deceived, viewed it, sharpened it. Of a daughter who at last realized how much her father loved her. Additionally, a mother who will educate her own child. The true meaning of legacy." That evening, as I made my way home on Derry, became aware of something while the sky was still and the city lights were reflected in puddles at my feet. Not all justice is loud, but restorative. It's thunderous to heal. Generations are affected. And this is sometimes the sweetest form of retaliation. While they perish in the ruin they created for you, you get to live freely. All of this has taught me that being betrayed does not determine who you are. Your answer to it does. I used to believe that being strong meant remaining quiet, persevering, and avoiding attention. However, I've learned that speaking up, leaving, and rebuilding on your own terms are all signs of true strength. Occasionally, the individuals closest to us shall turn our goodwill into a weapon. They will try our love's limits, perplex loyalty with deference, and presume that we will always put peace before truth. However, we owe no one our quiet, not even the people who attempted to silence us. For anyone listening who have been veto, undervalued, or made to feel insignificant, know that you are not alone. You're not weak for having faith in others, but strong for standing up for yourself when they no longer deserve your faith. Not all forms of retaliation involve yelling or show. Occasionally, it appears to be one of dignity, peace, and achievement that no one can take away. Additionally, the peaceful assurance that you made it through and emerged stronger. Since the greatest Edavastan is not retaliation, you're turning into everything they told you wouldn't be and completing it without their help.